Hey, welcome back to another activity video. In this activity, I'm going to show you my favorite way to come up with interesting percussion loops and sounds and textures. And I'm just really excited to show you this because, like I said, it's my favorite. So I'm going to show you two variations of this. One, I'm going to show you the variation where I actually went out and just used my phone or a field recorder and just made some weird sounds. I just left the recorder running. I walked around and shook things and hit things, and I ended up with a recording that was like 15 minutes long or so. And that turned into some really fabulous sounding percussion in a tech house track that I was working on, and I've used it since then for a lot of other things. The second way that I'm going to show you is actually ripping something off of YouTube. I'm not going to show you the process of ripping off of YouTube, but basically, if you do a little Google search on how to download from YouTube, download an MP3 or an MP4 from YouTube, then you'll be able to find out how you can rip something off of YouTube, and you can use things like ADSR videos or Taika drums, or in this case, I'm going to use some audio from some really amazing African percussionists, and I'll show you how that all sounds put together along a kick drum and a snare drum. So let's start with the field recording first. So the way that this works is it's going to be integrating a bit of randomness here. So we are going to be doing a little bit of resampling, and I have no idea what we're going to end up finding with this experiment for this demonstration, but that's why this is such a fun activity. So whenever you're doing this activity, I highly recommend just adding like a kick drum and a snare drum, or even just a kick drum at first, just so that you have a little bit of context of where that percussion is sitting. Otherwise, this is going to sound just like random noises that are firing off, and so then it makes it less fun. So for guaranteed the most amount of fun, definitely get a kick and a snare pattern going. So let's do that first. I'm just going to get a kick sample, whatever that might be. I'll use the clonk. Making the loop. Okay, that'll do the trick. I may or may not add a snare drum a little bit later on, but right now I'm just going to rename these tracks and change the color. As you know, I like all my tracks to be white because they're easier to read. And yeah, I'll just call this kick, and then this will be our randomness. Okay, so we're going to be using the Simpler device. The Simpler device is an amazing MIDI instrument that actually is what plays back the audio inside of a drum rack. This is a really powerful tool, and you're going to be learning a lot more of this here and there throughout this whole course and into the future. And so I won't talk about it too much here, but what I will tell you about is this amazing slice mode. So first off, when you're looking at this interface, you get a bit of control here. So you get 3 different modes to play back your sample. Classic mode will loop the sample. It's like if you wanted to record your voice and make it into an organ, you could do that. One-shot mode is the default mode that you'd use for triggering drum sounds, where you'd trigger the sound, it would play from the start to the end and then stop. Whereas with the classic mode, just by its default settings, if you held your key down, whether it was a drum pad or a piano keyboard, if you held that key down, it would just keep looping based off of your settings there. And then the slice mode, which is what we're going to be using here, is actually going to apply a musical key or a musical note that corresponds to your keyboard to each one of the transients, so that we can create some weird randomness. So let's hop into my user library, and I've got some pieces that we're going to be using for this first percussion opportunity. This is the field recording. So I'm just going to do a search actually, because I've named this one Random Trash, because it is quite literally random trash. And I have a few options here. Let's listen to them. That looks like it's been removed. Okay. So you can tell that it's just a bunch of random stuff, and I did lie. It's not all trash. Some of this are refundables, so make sure to recycle, kids. Okay, so I'm gonna just take this audio clip and I'm going to drag it right into the display of this simpler device. So you'll notice that when I drag it in here, you can see how long this is. You can also see that there's this big blue section here. And just like zooming in and zooming out on your arrangement view, I've got this same magnifying glass icon here, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit closer so that I can see what these blue lines are. So each one of these blue lines, starting at the gray start marker here, these are all going to correspond to the notes on your piano keyboard or in your piano roll. So if I just activate the QWERTY keyboard here and I start hitting the keys on my computer, you can see I can trigger these little slices, and it gives it a completely different feeling. So this is basically the premise of this activity here, and we're going to be morphing this into some sort of a percussion loop that's going to sound hopefully pretty sweet. So how do we make something that's going to be unique to us? It's not going to follow the same sort of patterns that we like to kind of program by default. And how can we resample this into something that we can save into our elements folder? So what we're going to do first is we're going to start by adding a MIDI clip here, and I'm just going to add 16th notes here. So I'm just going to add a note here. Maybe I'll use the pencil tool and I'll draw across, and then I'm going to just loop this using Command L, and you can see that now we've got 16th notes all the way across that MIDI clip. Let's listen to this right now. Okay, that's interesting, but of course it's only playing one note, so this is where the magic comes in. We're going to use a MIDI effect, so I'm just going to search for the MIDI effect that I want. I'm looking for random. If you don't know the names of the MIDI effects like I do, of course it takes a little bit of time and getting familiar, but if you just click on the MIDI effects category here, you're going to be able to see all of these different MIDI effects: arpeggiator, chord, envelope, note length. There are a lot of really good ones, but in this case we're going to be using the randomizer. And anytime you're using a MIDI effect, it's going to be added to the very beginning of your signal chain because it's affecting the signal before that MIDI signal gets turned into audio. Unlike an audio effect where we have to place it after the instrument device, we're going to add this to the left side. There we go. So just to give you an overview of the interface here, let's start with the chance knob. So the chance knob is going to basically flip a coin to decide whether or not the output of this device is going to be different from the input. So if we have this set to 100%, for sure, absolutely, every single note that enters this randomizer is going to be different than the one that enters. If we set it to 50%, then every second note approximately will be different. I like to keep this around 50% because in music, we'd usually want to have like a theme or a motif or like a home bass, and I like to visit a sound kind of just returning home. I find that I get the best response if I have this set to 50%. But experiment, see what you like. Choices, this is how many notes it will choose from randomly. So right now I'm going to just leave it at 12 because that is more than enough. And then we get to choose the scale. So basically it takes the number of choices and times it by a number of scales. In this case, I don't really want to have a lot of options. I really just want to sit within one octave. I think there's going to be enough randomness in those 12 notes to create something that's going to be really awesome. Now on the right-hand side, we can see this little LED indicator thing. You can't change anything, but it's just an indicator letting you know if it's either added a note, onto the value of that note by increasing it, if it stayed the same, or if the note went down. So if it was a lower note, a higher note, or if it stayed the same. Underneath this, we get the opportunity to change the mode. So we can either have the mode set to random, where it's just going to randomly choose notes, or we could switch it to alternate, and that's going to create more of like a round robin option where it's going to cycle through the notes in a more systematic way. In this activity, we want random, so I'm just going to keep it to random. And then the very last parameter we get to change is the sign. So are we adding notes? Are we only going above the incoming pitch? Or are we only going below the incoming pitch? Or are we mixing both high and low with the by option? In this case, I want by because I want to flip and flop between a bunch of different notes. So I think this is going to do the trick. Okay, let's listen to this with these current settings. Ready? Okay, that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting. And you'll notice also that we have a few other options with the simpler. Actually, we've got a lot of options. The option that I'm wanting you to have a look at and play with is the sensitivity option and also the starting point. You can see if you move the starting point of the slice in the display, it'll actually choose the location of the slices. And if you adjust the sensitivity, it's actually going to spread those slices out over a longer distance. So basically, you're going to get, if you have a lower sensitivity, you're going to get sounds that are drastically different from one another. So I don't know which one is better, but absolutely these are two parameters that you're going to want to play with as you're sort of dialing this in and seeing if you can find some cool ideas. So let's listen to this with the sensitivity a little bit lower, and I'll move that start marker around a bit and we'll see if we can find something that's cool. Okay, cool. Already that's sounding really neat. And that brings me to my next point here, where when you're using this, since we're using a randomizer, there's a very slim chance that we're going to get the same pattern or the same result twice. So always be recording. And what we're going to do next is exactly that. So I'm going to create a new audio track, Command T, and this is going to be my perk. Maybe I'll call it Rando Perk. Okay, I'm going to change the color to white, and I'll set this to record arm, and I'm also going to route the audio from track 1, random trash, to the input of this track. I know some of the examples where I'm resampling, I would choose the resampling option, but in this case, I don't want to record everything that's coming out of the master channel because I don't want to have the kick drum in my recording. I only want the audio from my random trash sort of sequence thing happening here. So I'm going to set this to 1, random trash. I'll set the record arm on, and now I can hit that record button and play around with the parameters inside of that simpler device to get a pretty cool result. Here we go. Okay, so I've got some pretty cool recordings here, and this is exactly what I am looking for. Hopefully this gets you kind of excited to start experimenting with this. So this is the first sort of step here, and the way that we process this recording from here is kind of up to you. But I'm going to give you just a couple ideas before I move on to the next example where we're actually using a YouTube rip. And then I'm going to change the MIDI information so that we get a bit of a different result. So one of the ways that we can do this is we can actually go into this clip. And I know that I've showed you this before on a previous activity, but I just want to reinforce that this is an amazing way to find new pattern ideas and things like that. So we're inside of this recording that we had taken. You can see that we've got the shadow zone and we've got the area on here that's a little bit brighter, just indicating what's currently on the arrangement timeline. And what we're going to do is create a short loop in here. by just creating a selection, Command L or Control L on your PC. And this is going to create a looping pattern, which is very musical. It's going to feel less random. And then we can just shift this around until we find a part that we like. We can extend the length. We can do a bunch of things to this. So let's have a listen. Cool, so that sounds good. From here, we could manipulate it more, of course. We could reverse it. We could even take this device called the beat repeat and add this onto the track to create some interesting variations as well. But I'll leave that up to you to experiment with this. If we wanted to save this percussion pattern, what we could do, of course, is rename it and call it 120 BPM underscore. We don't have a key with this one. We do have a mood. I'm going to say it's maybe random, mechanical, and I'll add a hyphen, and then I'll say another awesome random trash perk loop core activity, just for my own purposes. And I'm gonna actually consolidate this because I really like that, and I'm gonna throw it into my elements folder, and you guessed it, right into the rhythm folder, and then we can use this later on for a song in the future. Beautiful. Okay, so the next part here, we're actually going to be using a YouTube rip in order to create something awesome, and we're going to approach making the MIDI just slightly different. So instead of adding a MIDI clip in here and just putting 16th notes all the way across, there are a bunch of ways that we can do this. So on an activity earlier on or later on, I'm not entirely sure. What we did was downloaded some MIDI from Billie Jean's banger, and I extracted the drums, and I might use those drums later on. But let's say I want to use those that drum pattern for something like making percussion. I can actually grab that that Billie Jean audio here. Let's see if I can find it. What am I doing? I'm just going to click on the folder and type Billie Jean. There we go. I've got two versions. Let's go with this one. And I'm going to drop this onto the track that has my simpler device. So now we've got this interesting pattern that vibes. It's actually rhythmic. It's not just a bunch of just straight across 16th notes. And let's listen to how this sounds here. Okay, different, a little bit slower. It would work really well if I also had the same beat going at the same time. Like let's say I just dragged this down and deactivated the kick drum. Let's listen to this. Okay, that might give you some ideas. The next thing I want to show you is instead of using a pre-made MIDI beat, You can also use grooves. Grooves are amazing. If you've seen any content about warping and adding swing, then you'll know that grooves are what allow you to quantize your MIDI notes or your audio transients to a groove. And a groove could be like a swing. It tends to give your music a very different feeling because it's taking groups of notes and pushing them closer together in time or moving them farther apart, and that creates a very appealing and very organic sound. So let's have a look here. I know I've got some kind of a swing groove. Let's have a listen. Interesting, yeah. Okay, let's go with 6D. Now, this is interesting because this is a groove. You can see that it's a .agr, but all an AGR file is really is just MIDI that contains, all of your velocity and your timing information. So you can start a beat, or you can start this process of making percussion by just grabbing that AGR and dragging it onto your timeline, and now you can work with this just like you would a MIDI clip. Let's have a listen to this. Oh, that sounds cool. Oh, I should be recording. Okay, I'm going to throw that over to the side. Let's switch the sample here from trash to something else. Let's switch this to a YouTube rip. So I'll hop over to my user library, and in the elements folder, I have a folder in here called sound design. This is where you're going to save all your field recordings, any like weird recordings that you've done, and I've got a folder here for YouTube rips. So I've got this one, and I'm going to just drag this right into my simpler device here, and you'll see that that's just going to populate. And once that has buffered and loaded up, then I'll be able to trigger this in the same way that I triggered all of that random percussion. So let's have a listen, and then we'll do a little bit of recording for this too. Okay, here we go. Okay, that's enough of that, but I hope that this has inspired you to start playing around with some perk sounds, and just, the possibilities are really unlimited with this, and and you can just have a lot of fun with this. Make sure to set your timer if you're not planning on spending your entire session on finding these random perk sounds, but this is an amazing way of coming up with some new ideas. And I'm going to just finish this off by showing you one last thing that you can do, where I'm actually going to be using a shifter device, and this is going to increase and decrease the pitch of the sound, and it has an LFO on there, low frequency oscillator. So instead of me turning up and down the pitch, it's actually going to automatically turn up and down the pitch at a specific rate and at a certain amount, on my choice of waveform. So I'll keep it on triangle, and I will adjust the rate down pretty low, and you'll hear what this is doing to the sound. So let's give this a go. Okay, enough of that. This is your task. I'd like you to play around with this and make a few random perk loops and throw them into your elements folder. Make sure to properly name them, and then you'll have accomplished your task. Okay, I'll see you in the next one.